you don't need other people to create the world and the environment or even your internal feelings.
Exactly.
You don't need other people to do that for you. Tribe and community has a place in helping you build on that. But when it comes down to it, that internal confidence is all you. That's all you, babe.
Yep.
Fear of the Free Child is a weekly podcast that centers
diverse narratives, insightful commentary,
learning with our children and deschooling ourselves,
owning our multiple identities and treating children with dignity,
creating community and sharing conversation from often silenced spaces,
breathing life into liberation practices proactively and on purpose.
It's about parenting. It's about self-directed education, loving. It's about learning, liberatory practices,
defining love for ourselves and giving our love to as much of the world as it can possibly contain.
Let's find each other. Let's support each other. All of these stories are important and should be shared. Chante and her partner are longtime homeschooling and unschooling parents of 3 children who are 11, 9, and 4. I am so grateful that Chante made time to be with us. I've known her for a very long time. We've worked together before. She does a lot of work around connectedness to self. She's a doula. She does lactation work as well. She has a wellness studio in Alpharetta, which you'll learn more about that a little bit later on in the show. And one of the things I love about the space that she occupies with her family is that they infuse both homeschooling and unschooling into the same household. So they are tailoring the learning experience for each of their children, led very much by their observations around their children. So you'll hear me talk about set tripping, which if you don't know what that means, look it up. But being able to talk to Chante today reminds me of an opportunity really to make the distinction, which is, I think, a little bit controversial or just disputed, I guess. Maybe controversial is too strong of a word. But unschooling is typically considered like a set or a type of homeschooling. And I disagree with that. I think that homeschooling is schooling that happens at home. And oftentimes it mirrors a traditional schooling environment, and sometimes it doesn't. And I'm learning a lot about that myself, not having a lot of experience with homeschooling outside of research, right? So I don't have a lot of direct experience with it. But unschooling can happen at home. So you can be an unschooler who's unschooling primarily doing things at home. But a lot of unschooling takes place not inside the home, but in the communities. And then on top of that, you have self-directed education, which I think unschooling falls under. So there's homeschooling, there's self-directed education, there's traditional school, there are charter schools. That's what it looks like in my mind in terms of the differentiations, because homeschooling is not always self-directed education because it typically does follow a particular curriculum. And unschooling can also include school. Because unschooling is really about learning that is self-directed. You choose it as the learner, whether you are a child unschooling or an adult unschooler, you choose it. And then you essentially design a learning path. That design can be something that unfolds as you go. Aspects of that design can be predetermined. It just depends on what you need. And I know that's hard for us to wrap our schooled minds around, but that's what it is. So self-directed education is not going to include something that is required that forces the learner to do it. That's the differentiation. So if someone is a self-directed learner, they can still be in college because even though there are requirements in whatever they're doing in college, they are taking that on as something that they are choosing to do, not because they have no other choice, but because it's a part of a bigger picture for them. So what comes up in my mind is, well, so isn't everybody who's going to school in a sense unschooling because nobody really wants to go, but you feel like you need to go, so you make the decision to go? No. Most children are in school because they are required to go. If a child is in school because they want to go and they are enjoying that environment, whether they're thriving or not, but they are enjoying that environment, they feel engaged and they want to go, then an unschooler can absolutely be immersed in school. The difference between what would make them an unschooler is that they can come home one day and say to their parent, I feel like I got what I needed, or I'm not getting what I needed. I don't want to do this anymore. And I don't know whether I might want to go back to school. Typically, an unschooling parent is going to say, okay, cool. Or let's talk about it and then get to the point of doing really what makes sense for that child, even if we are not in agreement with it, even if it's not the thing that resonates the most with us. That's how I would say unschooling and self-directed education, of which unschooling is one sort of. That's how I think that's different than traditional learning environments or the traditional approach to education. So you'll be hearing from Chante, who is homeschooling her daughter and unschooling with another daughter, and very much immersed in unschooling with her youngest son. So we're going to meet Chloe, we're going to meet Savan, and we're going to meet Sekou, and we're going to talk a little bit about how learning is happening for each of them in the same household. All of this, of course, will be on the show notes page, akilasrichards.com/Chante, Chante. I am so excited to have my longtime homie. Oh my gosh, like Chante has been in the mix since like, my old school event days with Mom in Mind and all of that. Chante Smith, based in Atlanta, wellness warrior, beautiful mama. Thank you so much for being here with us, Chante.
Of course, it's my absolute pleasure.
I know my Chante experience. Can you give us sort of like the overview of who you are, where you at, what's good, that sort of deal?
Okay, well, I guess in a nutshell, I am a homeschool mommy or unschooling, homeschooling, just a schooling mommy of three. I am a massage therapist and a doula, birth and postpartum, and a lactation consultant. And I've been doing those things for a pretty long time and merging all three of them for a long time. My children are 11. Well, two of my babies, the first and the last, were born on the same day. So they'll be 11 and 4 on the 28th of next month. And then all three of them were born on the 28th. So this past December 28th, my middle turned 9. So
wow. So we got 11, 9, and 4 on all 28s.
Yeah, all 28s.
Are you into numerology
I know.
at
Powerful.
all?
Yeah, absolutely. Powerful stuff, right?
I was going to say goosebumps because, oh my God.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and all of that energy it runs all the way thick through this house.
Interesting. And that's what I want to get into, Chante, because as you know, being in the space for a very long time under this homeschooling umbrella, the process, it looks like different things. It looks like different things for different households. It even looks like different things for different children within the same household. Even the terminology, as you said, sort of like homeschool, unschooling.
Right.
These are some of the reasons that I'm really excited to talk to you about it, because it will help, I think, to demystify the ideas around what these sort of alternatives to traditional education look like. So I'm just really grateful that you have this level of experience and are going to share that with us. So in line with that, can you tell us, have you been homeschooling the entire time? Have you been taking your children's education, sort of that responsibility in your whole hands from the very beginning?
The way that we kind of got started, and I'm glad you mentioned the umbrella of it and the terminology, because I thought that my husband and I both, and my partner, we've always just looked at it like it's your responsibility to teach your children. Yeah. So you don't wait until 4 years old or whatever time you send the babies to school. So from the very beginning, we've always taken that very seriously. And then my children actually have been in traditional schools. They've been in public school. And I can honestly admit that I do enjoy the balance of it, because I always say, we live in this particular society. There has to be some kind of balance for you to basically navigate it well, or at least know how to. Yeah. So, they've been in traditional school. My daughter went to pre-K and kindergarten. I homeschooled her first and second grade, and then my oldest, and then we did, I want to say, third grade on up, and now she's, I guess, somewhere between fifth, sixth, fourth, fifth, sixth, I don't know.
Somewhere in that mix, yeah.
Yeah, she's just learning stuff. And then my middle daughter, actually, she has Asperger syndrome. So I'm not sure if we'll delve into that a little bit later.
I would love to actually, because we did have another guest who you may know through online work. Yes. So, Darcel, yes.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I could not wait to hear that episode. And when I did, I was so thrilled.
Yeah. So am I. So was I, and still am, because I'm learning so much about how this sort of self-directed opportunity and really just personalized opportunity can really be such a lifesaver, really, for families who are dealing with these things on the spectrum. So yes, I would love for you to sort of give us an overview of what that is and how that ties into how you help with education of your daughter.
Great. Yeah. Well, but I will say that she did go to traditional school for a while, but her mind is very structured, very regimented. From the time she was able to, just kind of do things independently, she's always been very linear thinking. So school, just the way that it's kind of built on bells and schedules and all the things that I actually want to be away from.
Yeah.
She thrives on, her, just the way her mind works. She does not thrive very well on the whole, today we'll learn about birds. She needs to know in advance, what are we doing and why and when and what time.
When did you start realizing that? Because that's something that I'm always so interested in, and I think we need to know more about, in part because for me, I think that self-directed education, we tend to think that it means not school, right? Like that's what a lot of us think. I know that's where I was initially, but it means what it's titled, self-directed. So,
exactly.
Right. So as you exactly said, like for your daughter, she thrives in that environment. And though we have our own baggage, rational as it may be, around why that's not a good look, it actually, for her, it's ideal. And our jobs as parents is not to try to get them to come out of that, but to actually help them immerse themselves wherever we observe that they tend to thrive, right?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, every bit of that is exactly why. I mean, I'll tell you even further, when we decided to have her, I guess, quote unquote, diagnosed, which I guess is a whole nother topic for a whole nother day when it comes to diagnoses and, especially in the Black community. But when it comes down to it, when we decided to have her diagnosed, she was very small, and we had to do a lot of fighting just to get her seen, because as crazy as it is, they don't like to diagnose Asperger syndrome until at least 6 years old, which is really, really crazy. Because before then, you notice a lot of changes in the way that you guys communicate with each other. And our biggest thing was, we need to know how to communicate with her, so that, because everything is always all good. Everything is good. Everything is fine. We just need to know how to communicate with her, because it's just a difference in the way that she communicates.
Yes.
And when people understood that and didn't look at it as such a, like, what is wrong with my baby? What is wrong? That I can't, that drives me so crazy, because it's just like, well, what is wrong with you?
Exactly. I mean, this is about communication.
That is all. It's just that simple. And once you figure that out, which of course there are experts in every area of life, people who have done extensive study, when you come to terms with that and say, okay, well, they communicate different. Let's find out what it is. What's the best way to communicate with her so that we can have less meltdowns, or so that just everything can go really smoothly in the household and outside of the household.
Yeah. So what made you start to realize? What were some of the things that because when you say that 6 years old is so late because you noticed things before, what were some of the things that you and your partner were noticing, Chante?
From the very beginning, she just had a way. And I hate to say it, it's more like a parent intuition, and I know we're all I deal with, of course, I'm a doula, lactation. I deal with it all day, every day, where moms are just like, is she supposed to do that? Is she supposed to do this?
Right.
But it goes a little bit deeper than that. When you start to notice those quirky, like, little behaviors, and they start to make you feel something kind of in your heart center and, kind of in that gut, what is that center chakra there?
Yes.
Then you can feel it and you see it. And so for her, she had a very shrill scream. She was usually very quiet and observant. Yeah. And then she had some quirks, like she didn't like you to touch her hands. She never made direct eye contact. And these are all very, they were noticeable at an early age. So I would say maybe around 6 months or so, when babies are giggly and laughing and they just bring you so much joy. With Savant, it was so funny the way that we would just clown around with her like we were her own personal little clowns, and we would just try to make her laugh. And her stoic stance, and it's true to this day, with Asperger syndrome, there is no lies involved. If she laughs, she genuinely finds it funny.
Got it.
And so when she was small, it was exactly that. Like, unless it was something that literally just really amused her, and especially like in a very physical sense, like if you tickled her, then she laughed. But if not, then she just stared at you and looked at you like, "Are you done?" And that's it.
The part how you said your intuition and your, just your heart chakra and really being able to connect. Those are some of the things that I feel like we need so much more of an understanding of, because I know that some people hearing that will be like, "Oh, loud," or like, "Well, how do I do that?" Or "I don't have that," or "I don't know enough about that." Right.
I know.
And I think that's unfortunate though, because we do have that though. And that's the thing. I want y'all listening to this to realize that this is not something that you have to go up into the Himalayas to meditate for 17 years to come to terms with. The same way you have an idea when you're going somewhere and you get a feeling about whether it's the right place or not, or somebody you come across, you might not even speak to them, but you get a good vibe or a bad vibe. These are all things that you have access to, and particularly in parenting and raising folks, even when you didn't birth these folks, okay?
Yeah.
You have access to these things, and I'm really glad to introduce folks to Chante, because I know a lot of your work is really about connectedness to self, which really helps us to connect with the people around us. Yeah.
Yes, especially our children. And when it comes down to it, that's really, I always say that's the only way that babies really communicate is energetically. You don't think of it in that way when it's happening, but there's a reason why moms know that this is a hungry cry versus a sick cry.
Yes.
And it's not just because of the pitch,
Right.
Sometimes, yes, you slam your hand in the door. Yes, of course, there's a certain scream with that. But a lot of times when they're much smaller, you just kind of know and you feel it. And that's because of the connection that you have, whether people want to admit it or not. It's just because of the connection, which is why, you can leave the baby at, the grandmother's house, and grandma will say, "This baby cried from the time you dropped her off until you left." And she had no idea what to do,
Yes.
But it's because, you can look at that baby and say, "Oh, I know exactly what it is."
Yes, and thank you. And I didn't mean to cut you off before, but I had to use that opportunity to bring that in and to say, folks, at the end, when we talk about Chante's contact information, I really want you to consider reaching out, because as we talk, a lot more of these things will come up where we're really talking about your gut. We're talking about your intuitive feelings. And if you feel like you are somehow disconnected from that, I think a lot of the work that Chante endeavors to do and is doing is really good, centered on that sort of thing.
Yeah. That's all of it.
Cool.
And so, when it comes to parenting, that's just the number one thing. And even when it comes to self-directed learning, that's the only way that we really know, because we're connected with them enough to take them seriously, you know, a lot of times, instead of brushing them off. Savant, she had some telltale. And then as she got a little bit older, she would line things up around the whole house in a straight line, or along the bathtub at bath time, just line things up. She would have small rituals, like she could only eat out of the blue spoon, or the green spoon. And of course, you realize exactly how intense that is. I was fortunate enough, and I'm always saying I'm so fortunate to have Chloe, my oldest, to be there, whether it was in an antagonistic way or in a very helpful way, because when she would antagonize Savon, that's when the meltdowns would commence, and we realized exactly how intense the anxiety was. It's not typical anxiety that you get from taking something from a baby, you know, and it's not very out of sight, out of mind, but it became a very intense thing. And so, you know, we went on ahead to, actually, I presented it to our pediatrician, who I think it's really important to have a pediatrician that you trust. And I've had mine for a very long time. And he, you know, he is Jamaican born and raised, and he is very, very, very curt with me all the time. So he says to me, you know, oh, you know, Chante, you are just being, you know, this way. And I said, no, I'm not, you know, he's like, okay, well, let's watch her for a little bit longer and then I'll give you a referral. I said, okay. So I set another appointment with his wife, who is a nurse practitioner at the same practice, because I knew that she would understand more than he would exactly what I was feeling, even if it was just to appease me, even if it's just from one mother to another, for me to say, I feel like I see this, and I feel like this is just intense, and I want to check this out.
And that she would see some level of validity in it, mainly because you felt it.
As a mother of 6, she did. As a mother of 6, she did. She said, who am I to doubt what you're saying? You know? Now, of course, he, you know, he's, you know.
He's like, you're overreacting, you're panicking.
Exactly. But it's different with moms a lot of times. And I knew that with her in particular, that, you know, she would basically give me what I want. And I feel like I'm my child's only advocate. And so I'm going to go to whoever's going to give me what I want or need. And so that's what I did. We went through a series of testing at the Marcus Autism Center. And there, every single person, I mean, they were so surprised at the fact that for Asperger syndrome in particular, because it's such a high-functioning autism, then they were so shocked at the fact that I had a referral in the first place. And so they're like, here, you know, how is it that you are testing her? Why are you testing her? And again, it baffled me for people to not want to have early intervention on this kind of stuff. I'm like, well,
because they're not trusting you. That's a part of it. You know, they're not trusting you for the same thing that you said, where, you know, you have parents who are like, should they be doing this? Should they be doing that? And then that same thing extends right into school, where advocacy for your child, in a sense, becomes like confrontational. People are, and of course we know, because my kids were in the school system for some time, a couple of years, and you know that you have the parents who are like, my child can do no wrong. Every teacher is out to be the enemy. Okay, fine. But then there are many instances where, again, just the trust in the parent, it's like, as the parent, you're expected to turn your child over to a system, whether it's a medical system, an educational system, and you have very little say in that.
Absolutely. And that's just, I mean, it's always mind-blowing to me. If I don't say one thing enough, I'm always like, well, you're your child's only advocate. I tell you, this teacher is going to go on next year and they could be a phenomenal teacher. You know, one of the things that got me into homeschooling in the very first place, even before Savon was school aged, Chloe was in kindergarten. She had a teacher who was a great teacher. She was a great teacher. And it's a great school. It's an IB school. Supposedly it's fantastic. 10 out of 10 is their score. You know, but when it comes down to it, I won't say her name, but, you know, she was a regular old Paula Dean. You know, she was just as sweet as pie. And, you know, the Negroes can sit here and learn too. And I was not having that. So she called me one day and told me that my 6-year-old, who could read, and not just read, okay, I took pride in the fact, again, my partner and I, we looked at it like we teach them early. That's just what we do because you're supposed to. So we just did. And so my 6-year-old, she could read and comprehend, and, you know, she could count really well, and she could understand like basic math facts and all the things that they say that they're supposed to know. And she calls me and says, well, maybe Chloe should repeat kindergarten because feel like sometimes she daydreams and drifts off out the window at the birds and is not paying attention. And I'm telling you, I spent more time at that school than I would like to admit.
Listen.
And she's a great teacher. She was great. I don't doubt it. I think she wanted the best for her students.
However, right. See,
just not my student.
Exactly. And this is the thing. And then when we present these sort of things in our communities, oftentimes it's looked at as we are the issue. And when I say our communities, I'm not saying Black communities. I'm saying geographically where we are and the school community, the other parents and all of that, because they're not having the same experience, but they're not looking at why. Right? They're not looking at why. They're saying, well, my kid is doing great. And then it may even feel like your kid is getting this extra attention. And then they talk about pulling the race card. These are the reasons why we need this space. And as you said too, that we take pride in, what we see as educating our children. Cause I didn't always start out as an unschooler. We definitely, Marley and Sage, were taught in a more traditional way at home when we first started. And then it became sort of like, we went to like homeschooling for 2.2 seconds and then realized, really started to understand how learning happened and realized that we didn't need to be the teachers. But in all of this, Chante, there is the shrapnel, in a sense, the baggage from us not being trusted as people and us as children being taught that we're not trustworthy. So then that spills over into our relations. We don't even trust that we know what's best for our children. So it becomes really easy to trust the system. Yeah.
It is the truth. It is the truth. I will never forget that when I was doing my training for lactation, I had watched a small documentary and there was a young girl on there who had lost her baby during Katrina. And she was stranded on a roof. Okay. She had her baby, I want to say 8 days prior. And she was, stuck on a roof waiting to be rescued. Well, I think it took them a day, maybe two. I'm not sure. It took them some time to get her though. And do you know that her baby died? Okay, because she had decided not to breastfeed, back when she had the baby at the hospital. And all of her formula was in the house. When I tell you that, and again, for her, after 8 days, her milk is still there. It's not as intense as when it first comes, of course. But the fact of the matter is that she did not think, even for a minute, about what feels right.
Right.
She needed that checkoff, that verification, that validation from somebody to say, this is okay, you can do this.
What
you can handle it this
example.
way. Yeah. And so, and that was, again, part of why I got into more with lactation. More of the role that I took was more of a volunteer, because it's just like, you don't need anybody to tell you what's best for your child. You're the only one. Miss Kelsey, Chloe's kindergarten teacher. I know I said I was going to say her name. But, she went on. She went on the next year to her new 30 students, and she went on, and now I think she's teaching second grade. I don't know. But either way, she moved on. What would have happened with my child, though?
Exactly. And that was a long-term. Those are long-term effects. Even as you talk about trusting.
Especially when I know.
Yes. I mean, your physical body.
Yes. So I just, trusting the system, yes. I mean, if that's what you want to do, at least your research, same thing with Savon with the autism. Once I realized what it could be, or once I even just started seeing things, that's when I cracked open the books. That's when I started hitting the library.
Yes, you have to be that advocate. You have to trust your learning process. Absolutely. Because when you give the example of the sister that was stuck on the roof, even physically, I mean, her body, she probably had to suppress all this type of engorging and all of that. So this is why I think that is really such a great example, a tragic event and experience, obviously, but it gives the opportunity for us to learn from that, to say, look, what are you suppressing right now? And as you said, Chante, the amount of time that I spent at that school, not even finishing that sentence, this is my exact argument when folks say, I wouldn't have the time to help my kid with self-directed education. How much time are you spending with homework? How much time? But we're told that, but it's not true, because what we're calling patience, of course, it's hard to be patient when you're trying to help them memorize some shit that is not connected to anything that matters. But you spend time anyway. You spend 3 hours helping them to make sense of the goddamn new math. You spend hours at the school trying to get the teacher to see your child as human, or to say they're smart, not because I'm drilling them in these extra ways, but because some kids just happen to have this aptitude no matter what their color is. When you join the PTA, listen, we can go on and on. So you do, many of us have the time.
The social aspect of putting my child, because that was an issue I had with Savon when she was in actual brick and mortar school. Now, and I will clarify too that Chloe is, I guess, what is considered unschooling as a title. Okay, she's unschooled, as in we don't follow a set curriculum. We don't. We basically, it's very interest led.
Yeah,
Chloe schooling. Savon,
and that's the 11-year-old. That's your oldest,
that
right?
That is my 11. Chloe Sage is my 11, and then Savon, her schooling is in an online academy, and so, but that again is to feed her desires. Yeah. Savon does not need me. Okay, she's brilliant. She's probably smarter than all of us in this house. So she does not need me to wake her up and tell her, hey, did you do your lessons? And her internal thrives on that type of, all I did was facilitate it. All I did was pick the, and I don't even think I picked the school.
You just made sure there was Wi-Fi at the house so she could log on and get right.
Yes. When I've heard you say that before, I'm like, girl, that is absolute truth. All I did was pay the AT&T bill.
And that is facilitating it, because you're doing so much more, because the opposite, I think, of that is oppression and coercion. And the reason why I love that you bring up, why I think it's so interesting that you have the different styles and you and your partner embrace that for yourselves and your children, is because the question comes up a lot, specifically in unschooling spaces, about trying to help children who want to go back to school, even though the parents have already, sort of acclimated themselves and shifted to the mindset of unschooling. It's like, how can I get them to know that school is not the answer? And I always think that sometimes you need to let them do that, because and not to let them do that with the goal of like, they'll see why it's not good, but for you to learn together, because it may be that because they want to be there, which does happen a lot of times, that rote memorization and all of those, they're able to balance those with the other things that they get from it. And the whole point is that they feel that they are a part of the design of what learning looks like for them. So it may be contrary to what we want. Yeah.
Absolutely. And, one of the things I really, really, really love about this podcast is that, and I think I mentioned it to you before, is that it makes you feel okay for being who you are.
Yes. Good.
I mean, when you interviewed, I can't think of her name, but the one we were just speaking about that I love so much.
Darcel, Mahogany Way Mama.
Yes, Mahogany. Yes. Yeah. That was one of the things that I loved about that interview, is that when her daughter, and she said she knew it was coming. Yeah. She knew it was coming. And when she, she's like, the dreaded day came where her daughter is like, okay, I'm ready to go to school. This is what I want to experience. And it's almost like you don't want to be the oppressor on the other side either.
Exactly.
You just want them to be happy in what they are doing. If she wants to make that choice, and you feel like, again, it's, of course, children are still children in some capacity. And so while allowing them to be who they are, sometimes, I want to play in a pit of snakes is not a good idea,
Right. Right, but then don't treat everything they want to do like it's a pit of snakes automatically, especially if it's just because it's in opposition to what you want. And that was episode 11. Absolutely. By the way, season 1, episode 11 of with Darcel. Y'all need to go back and listen to that, because now you got me ready to listen to it again.
I know. I identify with her so, so very much. And when it comes down to it, we're all just learning in this process. We're all just trying to navigate life, So
all of us, no matter our age.
Yeah. And so my daughter, she's presented it to me. She said that she's considering going to middle school, she says. And this is how she says it to me: I'm considering going to middle school.
Yeah, okay. Which makes perfect sense. Of course you're considering things, as you have the space to consider things, which is what it should be.
Yes. And I'm like, okay, let's have a discussion about it. Yeah. And again, I want to make sure, of course, there are things foresight that we have as parents that they may not have.
Absolutely.
So in her mind, if she thinks that sixth grade is what she sees, in some of her books, or whatever, where it's all like, I don't know, Sweet Valley High-ish, where everybody is just kind of sitting around in the lunchroom talking about nail polish color.
Right.
I'm like, what? If that's your reasoning, then let me give you a little bit of insight on that, and then we'll discuss it though. If you still are, interested, we'll discuss it further, and we'll go all the way until you decide that this is best for you after having the facts.
See, and I love that. Did y'all hear that? Did you hear how much is now? This is Chloe, right? Who's considering this?
This is Chloe Sage. Yeah.
Yes. See, so, and I love that so Chloe is coming to you saying this, and you said, okay, essentially you took an exploration path to it, right? It's exploratory in nature, where you're saying, because we've done the same thing with Marley, who's 12, where she had these instances where she really felt like, because she's very social, and that's a big thing for her. So we're like, okay, one, we got to the root of the thing to say it actually, the idea, the focus wasn't school. It was about just more social activity with people in her age group and people who had her similar interest in person. So it allowed us to be able to say, oh, all right, cool. Then we'll do dance classes instead of you doing this. Then we'll do this part at 3:30 when all the kids are there instead of doing it at 11 those sort of things. Right. And then also being able to say, we can talk to other kids who are in school. We can look at some of the good and some of the bad. We can put you in a school because you can enroll and disenroll someone at any time. So there are other ways that you can do it instead of being like, oh my God, I failed because now they want a school, or you gonna see it's gonna be messed up. I'm gonna let you do it. And, not supporting that sort of thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. And then, even giving, I always say also that, being realistic about parenting too. I personally would love to believe that my babies are just brilliant at every single little thing. I believe that they are for the most part, my babies are
you're not
the
wrong.
most beautiful girls, But when it comes down to it, I know that they have struggles too. And, I'd like to give, I don't want to say credit, but I want to give them attention where it's due. So if I see that, Chloe is just wanting to, like she tells me, I enjoy homeschooling, or she has told me, because I don't like getting up so early. Yeah. Well, okay, I honor that, because I don't know that a lot of people like getting up very, very early. Some people, but some people don't, I don't, I mean, I thrive earlier. I do better when I get up earlier, but I don't like to do it necessarily. Savon, on the other hand, she's crack of dawn. She's up, made her breakfast, already sitting at the computer. Chloe, she will sleep on, and if I don't wake her up, she will continue to sleep.
Yes.
And so
I'm with Chloe. I'm of the Chloe tribe for sure. Yeah.
Yes, I heard that in you and Chris's episode last week about it.
Yeah.
Yes. And so, she will sleep on. And if she's telling me that, I want to do school, but homeschool, let's say, seems easier. Mm-hmm. Well, to me, that is not something that is okay. I don't want her to do something because it seems easier or it feels easier, just because, because I do want you to challenge yourself. Mm-hmm. I do want you to feel like you can elevate yourself if you want to. I want you to feel that way. And so, I'm not going to keep you in home, or keep you schooling at home simply because you want to sleep in.
Right. Right. Because we're going to talk about those things. Exactly. And this is the thing. It's not an all or nothing. Right.
It is not all or nothing. Yes. And so if I feel like she's, lacking, let's say she's at the age now where she needs to be a little bit more responsible, again, to navigate life, because you can't just kind of wander around, and so I might notice like, hey, you're getting pretty unorganized here, in the way that you're kind of keeping up with your things, or the way that you're even in your books and your writing even, you're just kind of all over the place, throwing things around, just whatever it is. Those are, again, there are remedies for everything. Mm-hmm. Nothing is the biggest deal ever. Like you said, there's no end point.
Right,
and again,
exactly.
that you have in school. If I notice that it's way, way too far left, there are things I can do about that. There are hybrid schools. There are classes. I could put her on a schedule if we need to.
Yeah, we can test out these different things. Yeah. And that's what this is, y'all. So one of the things I love about what you're saying, Chante, is that it helps to demystify this idea that homeschooling and in some instances, particularly unschooling, are sort of like this free for all where your kids don't do shit unless they want to and they don't challenge themselves and we don't have to be bothered with, aspects of parenting. It is almost antithetical to that. It would be easier to just be like, take your ass to school, do your homework. And if your teacher said you're tripping, it's going to be a problem. That would be easier because I can put that in a box. Thank you. And then I can measure it and all of that. What's so important about what you're saying and what you're sharing here is that you're hearing a parent just fucking parenting. Did y'all hear that, Matt? Just parenting. She's looking at things. She's saying, okay, this doesn't make sense to me. We go through this at home all the time because we are unschoolers. And for us, when those things happen, like when we see the girls, as you said, these skills that they need to navigate life the way we see it, because we recognize very much that we have a particular lens and there are limitations to that lens. But we also have context. That's the word in our house. The C word is context. So I'll say, let me offer you some context around this based on just having had more exposure to this thing. Let me give you some context around this. And so that's where we might come up and say, okay, to me, it looks like you're all over the place because you got these 7 books from the library. You said you were working on these things, or you said you had these things finished. But when I look at Trello or I look at your calendar, I'm not seeing these things, or you haven't logged into this, or whatever the thing is, you haven't practiced this thing. It gives us an opportunity to say, okay, I feel like you need some support, or Chris might say that to one of the girls. I feel like you need some support in this area because these things that you set up for yourself, you're not hitting these goals, or you haven't touched it in a long time. So then we can get together and say, sometimes it's about the tools. They might feel like we feel overwhelmed with just life shit, just trying to manage, the different pots on the burners. So we'll say, okay, cool. What if then you just did this one? Okay, cool. Then maybe you should do a bedtime because we also don't enforce a bedtime. Maybe you should try to, go to sleep before midnight, because if you want to do these things at this time before your guild battle at 11, and that's super important to you, then you probably got to get up at 9. Oh, I don't want to, you know what? Let's try it for a couple of days and see how it goes. Sometimes it goes horribly and they're like, see, we told you, and we look at something else. Other times they're like, oh, damn, is that all it took? So then it's not this adversarial thing all the way throughout. It's something where they see tyrannical. Exactly.
It's tyrannical. It's exactly what we talked about in the very beginning about it being so heart-centered and knowing, like recognizing something, and then your ego is not overly involved. So it's like, okay, well, she knows what she, you know what I mean? I know that I have a problem functioning if I don't get enough sleep. But I mean, hey, if she, after a week of trying it, you know, like you said, facilitating it and saying like, hey, you may need support in this area. If she's still like, no, actually, Mom, it works out a little better when I do it this way, then hey, who am I? Would I say, who am I to stop your shine?
Exactly. And then there's so much lessons. There's so many lessons in that, because even for us, like articulation, being able to articulate your needs, that's a huge personal leadership skill. So we say that all the time. I said, well, help me to understand, because I don't get it. And I feel like I need to step in. This happens all the time in our household. And they're like, why are you stepping in? It feels like, I'm like, because I feel like I need to step in, Black child. We literally say that. I don't get why such and such. And then we have the conversation, and I learn things and Chris learns things and they learn things. And we don't always end up like, kumbaya, my Lord. It's not like that. There are times where she's like, okay, I guess this is she being either one of the girls. Okay, I guess this goes back to this thing where I'm just going to trust that you know what you're talking about because I don't agree. And I have to be like, yup, and then we'll talk about it again in a couple of days. So, so it's
as much as I hate it because I said so, as much as I hate it. I mean, I hate that saying, like, nobody's business, especially being raised, on that word that, children don't have a voice kind of thing. I can't deal. But, and so I hate that. But at the same time, there does come a time every once in a while, I mean, every little tiny blue moon where even though I don't say the word specifically, it's just like, okay, but that's what I said.
Yes.
And
and
you
that's
don't have
what
to
it
look
is.
that up in the encyclopedia because that's what it is.
Thank you. We are parenting like every other parent, and this is not, I say all the time, self-directed education is not, or even aspects of homeschooling, because they are different. Mm-hmm. This is not, this doesn't mean that all of a sudden we don't have the same issues or a lot of the same issues.
Right.
It actually does prevent a lot of the issues, frankly. But some of the things that happen are just a matter of, they might not even be a parent-child thing. It's just human. You live with somebody.
Human
we're growing.
thing.
Right. Yes. So then, but we're in a position of power. So and we don't have a lot of language and practice. So then we use that instead of actually developing these personal leadership skills that allow us, as you said, the magic word there, ego, it allows us to be able to be present with our ego and say, okay, this is about me feeling some way about how she said this or why, and he didn't do that, or we were out and I felt embarrassed because they didn't know this.
Yes.
Those things come up, but we don't know what they are, and we don't have practice with managing them. So we take it out on the kid and be like, God damn it, if you knew your times tables, I wouldn't look like a bad parent.
Exactly.
But that's not the issue.
That is 100% it. Yes, absolutely. I mean, and then it too has to do with just common basic respect.
Thank you.
When it comes down to it, you respect every person. Yep. I mean, we were just having a conversation, me and the children, about pets, which I know is probably a little controversial, but we were just like, you don't buy people, you don't buy things, living things. You don't just walk up and say, I now own you. And asked them, which I was a little bit proud, I will say. I asked them, I said, who belong to, and they said, I belong to myself. Because they do, you don't belong to me. That means
they own themselves.
Have my way. You belong to yourself.
Yes.
And so it says to me, ironically enough too, speaking on that, is a lot of times they come to you with some of their issues.
Absolutely, which is also very opposite of traditional parenting.
Yes. And so when she feels unorganized, she comes to me. She says, I feel like I just am all over the place, and then she may be coming to me just to chat and telling me what her idea on how she's going to fix it is, or she could be coming to me for advice, and I mean, I'm probably not the best person to come to for that, and I'll tell her that, and I'll tell her,
but
hey,
you know what? To some tools.
Hey, absolutely. My sister is an accountant. If you want to have a one-on-one heart-to-heart with someone who is very linear thinking and who can help you with your organization, here's who you go to. Call Aunt Reese today. She'll talk to you about
that is community, right? That's learning everywhere in the world. Yes.
That is it. That is it.
Tapping into the resources all around us. And then it takes us off the hook for needing to be the quote unquote teacher of all the things. Because I know that was one of my issues when I was just like completely just looking at women like you and ETL, who I knew, even Sandra, who had been homeschooling at some point for a long time. When we were considering all the options, I was like, man, I wish I was patient like they seem patient, because I can't do it, or I don't know all the things that they probably know, like all of those things that are so much like I think a very natural part of the process. But then we stop there. We stop there because we're used to that idea. But what I love about this space and what you're saying is that we just tap into the resources. As Tamika said in episode 1, I don't need to know that stuff. I bet you I know somebody who... That's your favorite too?
Yes, it's one of my favorites, I'm telling you. Yes.
She broke it down. Like I promise you, I will be able to find whether I know them already, or I can use my resources on Facebook or Symbi or these sort of sites. I can find the resources that I need because my children trust me and I trust them. And just like children need community, communities need children. Because even with things like, as you said with your sister, say Chloe went to where your sister was for a day. Do you know that not only is Chloe learning all of these things from Aunt Reese, but all of these other people are looking at the things that Chloe is taking in, having conversations with her, being reminded about things that we need to remember as adults that oftentimes only kids can help us come back to. So you are creating now this ecology that your child is a part of. And we're missing that. We're lacking that.
Doesn't it turn right into a cyclic pattern?
Totally.
Because it just reminds you of what you don't know.
Totally.
That's it. It just reminds you that, okay, like people teach people. Mm-hmm. That's really what it boils down to. So yeah, there may be something like even right now, I'm pretty good at this, but I don't know much about this.
Yep.
There is someone who does, you know, when I talk to them, then I learn something new. It's the exact same.
Absolutely.
I mean, no matter what level it is on. I mean, sometimes my children come to me about things, and I'll tell you honestly, I think it's very freeing and empowering that I can just sit here and tell them, I don't know, girl.
Exactly.
You know?
Me too, Chante.
And then I tell them, you go find out, and then you come tell me so that I sound smart with my kids. I don't know. I don't know, girl. You tell me. You know, I don't know.
That's
but
right.
You tell me.
That's right.
And then you've taught me something. I have no problem, you know, saying to them. I mean, again, I guess that might be some ego, and then some of how we're taught, you know.
Exactly.
You think that your teachers know everything because that's what they tell you. You think your parents know everything because they tell you, I'm in power, and I will tell you. And then if I don't know, I will find the answer for you. No, ma'am.
No, and that's not how that works.
You will find the answer. You can read like I can read.
Going back to the life skills.
Bring it back to me.
Exactly. And going back to them, showing those skills too, so they know too that, and this goes right back to confident autonomy. Hopefully I say that at least once in every freaking episode, because there's that confident autonomy again for them to see and live from life experience that they don't need to have all the answers, and they can trust themselves to seek out and find the resources because they've done it many, many times in their homes growing up. They've seen their mama do it. They've seen whoever do it. They've had to do it themselves. So that's where that autonomy comes in. That's where that confidence comes in to be able to say, I will apply for whatever the hell job I want or I'll create whatever process I want to organize to. Yes. You know, whatever the thing is, because I know my capacity to seek and find the resources that I need for whatever that is. For me, that is one of the most critical things of even successful entrepreneurship.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But you notice too that people who think this way have a very hard time doing anything except entrepreneurship. Because when it comes down to, you know, you don't need other people to create the world and the environment or even your internal feelings.
Exactly.
You don't need other people to do that for you.
Exactly.
Even though tribe and community has a place in helping you build on that. Mm-hmm. But when it comes down to it, that internal confidence is all you. That's all you, babe. Yep. That's you. And so, when you know, when my daughter, you know, I remember when she was in the second grade, did I do second grade? Girl, it gets so confusing.
Same
I'm telling
here.
you.
Same here. I have to re-listen to like old things to be like, okay, it was 2014. Got it.
Yes. So in one of the grades though that she was in school, a bigger grade though, not like kindergarten, she had a project to do about Harriet Tubman, and she did her lesson or whatever, and when she was talking to her teacher, who was again nice teacher, you know, she was white and that was fine. But of course, we got different understandings and different struggles. Things like that I take very seriously. And so, you know, obviously, Chloe's not going to just know that Harriet Tubman was, you know, this or that, whatever is in like your textbook, you know. She's going to take that like 5 steps further. And so that's what we did. Yeah. Well, Chloe had stated a fact to the teacher, and the teacher told her that she was incorrect, and she actually marked it wrong on her lesson, and it was actually a wax museum project, so she had to give a little speech. Mm-hmm. So Chloe removed it because the teacher said it was wrong. But I knew it was right, and Chloe knew it was right because we researched it together. Mm-hmm. And so I said, well, why did you let her tell you that it was incorrect? And she said, well, because she said it and she told me I needed to take it out. And I said, well, no, it's a fact that may make her uncomfortable, but you need to do what you think is best. Yeah. If you know this is right, whether you want to speak on it in front of the class or not is a totally separate issue, but you do need to let your teacher know, I'm sorry, but this is actually not even I'm sorry.
I was about to say,
that was incorrect. That's it. I can't do anything for you except give you the reference.
Right. And the fact that you just insisted that I take it out, right? Like you didn't even go through the point. I mean, first of all, it's not like you're teaching this year round. I mean, it was probably in February, you know, like,
you know, it was.
Okay. How did I know this? Right. So that's the first thing. And then you're limiting it in addition to that. So there it is again, this idea that these things are not about attacking teachers. These things are about a system that continues, right? It feeds into our oppression and subjugation and our personal sense of being able to navigate the world and live in the world as ourselves when you have other people editing our shit and then calling that validity. Yeah.
I told her, I said, well, Chloe, you decide what you want to do. Chloe goes to the teacher. She tells her, hey, you know, this actually is a fact. And she gave her the reference. And the teacher tells her, that's fine, Chloe, but this is not going to be on, what is the name of the test? Either Georgia Milestones or CRC or whatever.
Wow, but she said that.
Going to be on the test. And so Chloe said, but I thought that this was for my project. And she said, well, of course, you know, and then she gives the whole build. And, you know, again, that whole I am your superior kind of thing is what ends up trumping the confidence of my daughter who actually came back to say, the point of this was that you told me to take this out based on it being an incorrect fact. And it actually is a correct fact. And so, you know, I'm coming to you, and I feel like those are things that should be greeted with a good thing. It's a good thing. It's like, you know, look at you with the courage to speak up to me. You know what I mean? Because you should.
Yes.
That is exactly right.
But that's penalized. And these things are not, they don't just end in school. She didn't just have this wonky experience in whatever grade.
That to me is a credit to your manager.
Thank you.
And so when it comes down to it, you end up doing something ridiculous that you know makes zero sense.
Yep.
And going to them and saying like, hey, you know, this makes zero sense.
Yep.
And they say, we'll do it anyway.
Absolutely.
You know, because this is what the client wants to see or because blah, blah, blah. And you're like, well, this just it don't feel right.
Yeah. And then you silence yourself. Like in some regards, you won't even go to the person, whether that's a supervisor or a teacher or your partner or whomever, you won't even go to them because you've gotten that shock, you know, that feeling every time. The imprint is when I do that, it's problematic. So this is how these things.
It silences your voice.
It silences your voice. In adulthood.
The American agenda. That's what it does. It silences your voice and it furthers agenda to keep what they consider disenfranchised people disenfranchised.
Absolutely. So, that's why it's important, the aspect of people of color in these alternatives to traditional education. And I know that most of the people who are listening, you don't need a reason why. You get why. And you also know that I don't write or speak for the people who are just like, that's foolishness. This is a supportive space and an exploratory space, not a defensive space. But I will say that one of the things that really come up for me with this is that we tend to look at learning as this like child thing. So it's this weird thing that we've yet to figure out because we're like, how do children learn? Yes. This is a human thing. And you alluded to this at the beginning, or maybe even straight out said it, Chante, that a lot of these things are this is just a human thing. This is just how learning happens. So we get to learn a lot about how learning happens by observing children because we focus so much on that idea. But when are you not learning? I mean, think about it. There's so many things that you're consistently learning. And those things that happen to you in your environment as a child, those are the things that determine like how you are as an adult, your approach to learning, your approach to people, which is why it's so important that we not focus on the educational system and reform and shit like that. It's why it's so important that we focus on learning and people and children as a conduit in terms of being able to observe how these things happen and to be able to go back to yourself and be like, yeah, that's actually what it is for me now. And that's what it's always been for me too. Then, you know, we remove that barrier between ourselves and kids as these weirdos that we got to try to figure out how to fill with information when we realize the humanness.
The humanness of it, just the basic humanness of it. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Now, so the kids are 11, 9, and 4. And as we said with Savon, there's a specific environment there where she's in a virtual academy. That's how she thrives. Chloe is more what most people understand as unschooling, where it's interest-led. She self-organizes. She does things that are connected to what she's into, and you all support that. And then, so now your son, who's 4, Sekou, yes, and he is just so beautiful. I love his on Instagram. And I mean, he has such a big, vibrant personality already at 4. What have you learned? Like, how is it different, your approach with him from your experience with being with Chloe and Savon?
With Sekou, what I am learning, I think, is that there are about 10 billion ways to parent. That is my number one thing, because I promise with my girls, even though I parent them totally different, I guess, or, the way that we are, our relationship is very different. And that worked for a long time. And there's a nice little gap between Sekou and, Chloe and Savan. And so when he came along, I'm thinking, I got this in the bag. I'm homeschooling, I'm doing it. My babies, they got it, know? And he's just a fireball of a person. And he's absolutely taught me, that people come out as people.
Yes.
That's it. So he is who he is, and all that's taught me is that they are whole. And all that's taught me is that I don't have to I don't know what to do with him half the time. He does to me. He does to us.
Exactly.
So
he does to y'all. I love that.
Yeah.
And you're observing and you're along for the, I always say that to the girls. It's like wild horses where it's like, my job is to not find the right stable or whatever. It isn't that. I kind of run alongside did you eat? Are you thirsty?
Right.
Half the time it feels like that.
That is it. That is it, and every once in a while, having to just stuff a little broccoli in there,
exactly.
just try it,
and
but that's about it. I don't
stop and all of that. And as you said, I love how you mentioned how they'll come to you when they need things too. A lot of it is just that being prepared to support in the way that they're telling you they need support. Because this happens too. I'm stewing in my corner why wouldn't she just use this as I told her that this is the best, blah, 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 blah. And then I'm managing my own emotions around it instead of making it her thing. And then it'll be weeks later and one of them will come to me Mom, I was doing this and da, da, da. And then I have to fight my urge to be I told you should have used that. Da, 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 da. But they come to it on their own and then I get to feel good about supporting them. So now they're open to the tool or not. But now that thing is no longer an issue and I can realize where it's my issue, as opposed to when I'm supporting. Cause sometimes my issue can look like support. I am supporting you. Do what I say.
Right. Yes.
So that can be really tricky too. So I love that you said with Sekou, he does to you. You get to see a lot of the ways where you're actually, he's good. I don't need to apply anything here. And I'll know when I need to apply something and I can apply it and it could be quote unquote wrong. As we go through this all the time, we're damn, I wish I didn't approach it that way. That's cool too, because that's going to happen. So you can have the dialogue with your human about where you are. And I promise you, they won't be forget it, I hate you because you did this thing.
No, they're going to come back to you 10 minutes later.
Yep.
So that's what it is. But with him, it's just taught me that there's, yet another, way of doing things. And that's, I think, a big lesson that we all, have to learn, especially again, growing up in this particular society. It's so one way and it's so tunnel vision and it almost feels uncomfortable to do what is most comfortable for you.
Yes. Oh.
And so to break out of that idea, it feels almost wrong, but it's the most natural feeling to you. And so you're just well, I'm just go ahead and do it,
Absolutely.
And so that's the thing with him, surprisingly enough. I remember watching Steve Harvey about unschooling, and there was a young lady on there, and she was saying that I believe her daughter was 5 or something or 6, and she didn't know how to read.
Yes.
And everybody, when I say that, the scholars hit the roof. They was losing their minds.
Okay. Why are you not parenting? What the hell are you doing? Blah, 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 blah.
She's just she could not get a word in edgewise because she's but what about the fact that she's going to come to me and say, I just want to know how to read? Or when she actually picks up a book and just starts figuring it out.
Absolutely.
And that was the idea that brought it to mind when I was thinking of Sekou, because he is around sometimes other children that are his age who apply different things in different ways, of course, and depending on what their parents do with them, especially, I always give special props to only children and, the firstborns who are still kind of small, who, maybe Sekou's age, I'm tag along with Josh, And Josh may be able to tell you that that's green.
Yes.
But when it comes down to it, when he is good and ready for whatever mode it fits, it could be just because he likes Ninja Turtles. he wants to know what color they are or why they look the way that they do or what turtles are even, and so then he comes and he just talks to me about it. And
and there's the humanness again, Chante. You're dealing with him as a human and not a thing that is this gauge for your success, because that a lot of it is around that too. Like, we present our children to society every time we step out there. See, look, I'm not failing. See, look, like, we do that. And so a lot of these things we can recognize, and I hope this is connecting for folks even now and listening to you, that a lot of this shit is so random. Like, we didn't decide, by the way, somebody decided that these are the things your kids should know by this time. So that means automatically they decided certain things, which means automatically that there are a bunch of things that they decided were not important. Right?
I'll take it a step further with that. I just have 3 things. I told you: the sex, the revolution, and the baby.
Yes, and I'm for all of those. I'm here for all of those.
And so when it comes down to it, the education, it does have a lot to do with, just systemically how the country is going to be run and how the people are to behave in the country that's being run.
Totally.
So, and so when it comes down to it, this is just a product, yet another product. School system and every other system that's in place, the medical system. And that's fine. Everything has its place. But, I personally don't necessarily want to be a part of a system that is, basically training robots. That's not something that makes me happy.
And perpetuating these horrible ideas that the same things that we think are wrong with society now, and by we, I mean like all humans. A lot of us can have, no matter where we're from, no matter what country, no matter what background, we have similar ideas on certain things being, bad or wrong or ineffective, but we're still using the same system. And that was my point with doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result with the system, that somebody chose what things they need to learn. And then we hold those up as the barometer. Like, exactly. Like reading and colors.
On purpose.
Yes. But the thing is, those things are not connected to anything. So when you look at reading, as I think I said, even on the Steve Harvey show, if I didn't, I should have. I know I say it all the time outside of that. There are no studies, none, that effectively connect early reading with any other sort of advancment in adulthood or even being an older child. None.
Say it again.
None.
Say it again.
There
because
are
I promise
none.
you, I mean, when Chloe started school, I was screaming it from the rooftops. My baby can read. Oh, my baby can read.
Same here. So did I. Yeah.
And she could read from the time she was 3, okay? That teacher straight up looked me in my face and said, well, that is very good, and we're going to put Chloe at a table with Lindsay here, who has trouble reading. And then Lindsay will lean on Chloe, and Chloe will help Lindsay, because this basically, she didn't say this part, but this is what it translated to me, is a social environment, and that's it, because she's 5. And so she's going to be here with Lindsay, who's also 5. And I'm like,
like, how is that? What else? What about all the other connections? Right. Absolutely, Chante.
Right. And so I'm like, but if she's on a, the test that she's on a 2nd grade level. Yep. And they're like, yes, but she's 5. Mm-hmm. And so her 2nd grade level mixed with Lindsay's kindergarten level is going to put both of them on a 1st grade level.
Which
How
is
about
what
that?
We need.
That's really what it boils down to. And again, I mean, I hope that it doesn't. I know that a lot of times when I speak, I sound very, radical is probably not the word, but very pro one side, or I don't want to come off like I'm bashing the system, because again, I feel like there are systems are in place for a reason. I just feel
I'll do it for you, Chante. I absolutely am saying that the system isn't working and that we need a totally different set of systems, plural, that fit communities. Yeah, I'll do it for you. It's cool. Yeah.
Thank you. I didn't want to come off because I do also know that I even have friends that are a part of especially educational system, and they want to make things better, and they want to help children and this and that. I just feel like the structure of the system is flawed. And
it actually has everything to do with our compassion for people, including the people who are stuck in the system trying to do better by our babies. So while I appreciate the effort, I am one of those people who think that that effort would be much better spent elsewhere. I do. I don't think that those people, you know, like we've had people like that even on the podcast, women like Leslie Bray, who's here in Atlanta. Yes. Who dedicated her time as a teacher for all of those years and is doing that sort of thing now. I feel like that work, like what Leslie is doing now, to me is far more powerful than what she was able to do in the system. She's the one that now has the
community groups, right?
Kid cultivators, absolutely.
Yes,
and they are that hybrid of like they're homeschoolers in there, they're unschoolers in there, they have all sorts in the mix, and I love that. Everybody's saying that the goal is raising free people.
Ain't nobody
so what is it? Ain't nobody said tripping, and that's what I love about it. And so this is what we need to realize too. So when we go back to that idea that we are presenting our kids to society every time we come out. So we have these mile markers like the reading and the colors, and then we feel bad when they don't know it, and we feel really good and bossed out when they do know it.
Yes.
Realize that none of that shit is tied to these adult life skills, the things that we need to go. These are all essentially things for the test. So if you operate outside of the test mindset, then you're not so much focused on what your child doesn't know, but you're getting together with other children so they can share and other people, period, because not just children.
Right.
So they can share and learn together, and then organically things form out of that. So you might see a Chloe sitting, pretending to be the teacher to Lindsay and whoever else. And they did that. Now Lindsay's fully engaged.
They did that.
Or you have a kid sitting by themselves, like Tamika said in her episode with her son, where he's like, he started reading because he like, I don't want you mixing up with me when I'm doing the video game stuff. I want to do that by myself. So I'm just going to say these words right here. It is as organic as that. And the more we are exposed to those truths, the less that other shit continues to make sense to us, and the more space we'll make for actual learning. That's really what I believe. Not 100%. That will fix the fucking system, but that will actually focus on the people.
What would the world even be like if everybody could just be themselves? What would it even be like? I just have no idea. What would it be like if no one told you exactly how to do every single thing that you do? If your education is not micromanaged.
Yeah.
If your life, basically, in essence, is not micromanaged.
Yeah.
There's still a place for, again, certain systems. I mean, we have currency. We have, we have reasons.
Which is also a flawed system. Don't get me started on
don't
currency.
Even get me started. That goes in my revolution box.
Right.
Don't let me open that box too far.
That's the next episode. When Chante comes back, we're going to talk about sex and currency and how that's all connected to self-directed. Right.
Yes, and how it all fits. Because when it comes down to it, it's just, it does. It really does. And even when you were saying just a second ago, like these things that we're doing, it helps. None of these things are very helpful for just the functional adult, you know, like knowing your colors or early reading and things like that. Yeah. When it comes down to it, though, it's not outside of the test, like you mentioned, it's not even beneficial for them at the moment.
There you go.
What I mean? And so when it comes down to it, then what would it be like if Chante, who is very, very interested in, I don't know, the way that plants thrive, and someone else who is so interested in the way that computers work, and all of these people come together without someone saying, well, that's probably not the right way to do that.
Right.
I just can't imagine. But I know that in my household, it feels great.
Absolutely. And all over the world. Okay. Your household is a microcosm of so many places.
That's right.
Who are doing this now. I mean, I know India is having a huge revolution around self-directed education. It's happening in so many places, and this is so encouraging.
Yeah. Wasn't there something happening in Kenya, I think it is?
Yes, there's a school. Yes, a few people have told me about a school that's there, and also South Africa. Just really grateful to know about, and certainly here in the U.S. as well. So there are many, many places where people are saying, okay, we're not going to keep on complaining about the system. We're going to shift the focus to people and learning. And then you start to see how things are so connected. Yeah.
Because I feel like the complaints are what, eventually could, cause a change. So, I mean, I'll do both. I'll sit here and tell you, that this was ridiculous how my daughter was treated, and I'm pretty sure that there's a whole group of, because if I don't say it, then this other mom here, who I actually did have this experience, another mom at the bus stop, who was just like, they told me that my daughter should stay back in kindergarten too. And I'm like, why? I'm like, so I'll complain all day long. But while at the same time, making my own changes too, because I'm not going to be a victim of it.
And that's the thing.
I'll tell you that this is ridiculous.
That is the thing. And I love that you said the victim thing. Thank you, because it is ridiculous. And I love that you mentioned the victim aspect too, because we feel like either we feel like we are victims of the system, or in many cases we keep our children in the system because we don't want them to be victims of the other system, which is the criminal justice system and those sort of things. So all of those things are tied in, particularly for people of color, which is why you got to get with, so the homework assignment here in this non-school environment, the homework assignment here is find someone who is immersed in an alternative to traditional school and ask them questions. Find somebody in your community that you trust and get to know how learning is facilitated in the space for them. And you'll see that there is a lot more nuance to homeschooling than people even recognize. And your household is such a beautiful example of that. So thank you for letting us peek in. It looks like a lot of different things. You know, you are empowered to really facilitate a design for education, ongoing learning that is really going to be powered up by who your child is and not what you know and how much money you have and where you live. And that sounds crazy, but it is absolutely true. And I see it. So go out and find these folks, whether it's online or even somebody locally would even be better, and get to know what's happening, because that's going to help you to get some clarity around how you cannot be a victim on one side of the coin, either in the system or because you fear the system, because that's what it is for a lot of us.
Yes. And it feels so good. Ultimately, it just feels so good. I mean, I'll tell you that the stresses that you have, the ones that are so necessary to have, to me, that's more than enough, you know? And so I don't need to stress myself further because I'm not sure if my child is learning, you know, according to what guideline, or, you know, if my daughter comes home with, you know, 3 weeks worth of homework to be done in 2 hours, or, you know, or even not being challenged enough, you can fix that yourself. So, and I think that that's the point, you know, that I'm always at, where it's like, you know, when it comes to balancing, even for homeschool moms, there's another podcast, I think her name is The Christian Mommy or something like that. But she goes into some of that, you know, like mothering the mother, which is a big deal for me. And it's almost impossible if you're being pulled in every single direction. And then it even leads to all this guilt and shame and these really strange negative feelings that you didn't even, you know that you were capable of feeling about yourself.
That we don't talk about.
It's just not necessary to do that to ourselves, because there's enough like actual guilt has a place, shame has a place, things have a place. And so there's enough of that is actually justifiable. And I say this all the time with my breastfeeding mamas who sit up there and tell me, like, you know, well, I don't know, you girl,
go
you
get it.
Somebody who went to work and still fed that baby.
Thank you. Go find it.
Don't come for me in 2017 and in 2016
and 2015 and 2014.
This is not right. This is not even 2000, you know, where any of that can fly. For me, I just look at it like the work that I know, and I know that this is said a lot on your podcast, like it needs to be done, and it needs to be done more. It needs to be more expanded. It needs to be more, you know, and I agree with that 100%. But I also think that, you know, people have to want it.
So if you want Chante to be your person, if you're in and around, so if you're in and around Atlanta or on the interwebs, how can folks reach out to you if anything that you said just really deeply resonated and they want to go to your Facebook page or wherever you are and scroll through, say, what are some of your resources? How do we reach Chante?
Okay, well, I can be reached on all social media as Lady Lovely Peace, just all one word, just the way it sounds. And then my wellness studio is in Alpharetta, Georgia, and that is called Creative Wellness. Awesome. And so it's just a space to get grounded and feel good and even just release. And the website for that is yourbodyatpeace.com.
And I will make sure to put all of those things on the show notes page, which is going to be akilasrichards.com/Chante. That's CHANTE. All of that is going to be on the show notes page. I am so grateful for you, Chante. And I'm not kidding about coming back to talk about, like sex and currency, because this season I really want to, and you even brought up self-mothering, which is something I write a lot about, and it's personal work for me, like all of this is. And so I would really, this season, I'm really broadening the scope of the space, because I felt like season 1, there were enough people to give you sort of like an overview, scratching the surface of how this work looks. But I really want us to understand how we are connected to the work, and how this is not just about even children or parents, but how this is really a lot about like personal leadership, like owning yourself, trusting yourself.
Absolutely. I'm so honored. Thank you so much, Akilah, for having me on. I mean, you are my sister from another miss.
Same,
and I have learned so much about mothering the mother from you. So thank you so much.
Oh, you are so welcome. And thank you too.
Wasn't that good? Did I not tell you that Chante was really going to give us some deep insights into how learning is happening in her family, and how she's infusing homeschooling and unschooling, and having that really make sense for what she needs and what her family needs. If you want to keep hearing these episodes, your support is critical. Head over to AkilahSRichards.com/podcast. You'll see my Patreon link there. You can support the podcast in that way. And of course, I want you to follow Fair of the Free Child on SoundCloud. It's under Radical Selfie, which is my name on most social media spaces. And you can also rate the podcast on iTunes, on Google Play, all that good stuff. All of that helps us to get in front of more people and really spread the message that self-directed education is working for many people of color, and looking at the ways that we get to that point, or some of the things that we do to really make sure that we are not imprisoned by a system that really isn't in support of us or our children. I hope you enjoyed it. Remember to check out AkilahSRichards.com/Chante, CHANTE, to stay connected with her, and I will talk to you soon. Peace.
Thanks for listening to Fair of the Free Child podcast. Like the show? Then show your love or give your feedback at AkilahSRichards.com.